Yay.
Hey, I did great. So this I saw on Alberta homeschooling site, and I'm looking at it and saying, okay, you have certain learning outcomes expected in Alberta, and it's very different from everybody around the world. Obviously, if you're a registered homeschooler in BC, you don't need to do any of this. You can do it for yourself if you want, but there's so many different people that I work with around the world, and no matter whether they're responsible to be accountable to someone like the government or not, just them framing an education at home and understanding what they're doing, translating what they did when they were kids, math, and then recognizing that math happens in Legos or in discussions on ratios and percentages when you're grocery shopping. Being able to slot those in is really useful for us understanding it. So that's why I wanted to invite you on to our conversation, because this is really useful. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, it is useful, and it's pretty simple. When you compare that to the government curriculums, I know in Alberta the government has 1,400 curriculums outcomes, because we're outcome based.
Yeah.
They're great, over 7 subjects, and homeschooling parents look at that and go, whoa,
Yeah. I did it too in BC. I tried to read the learning outcomes, and I was like, I can't do this.
It's written in educational speak, and it's so complicated, and it's so much duplication. Like, curriculum developers work in silos. So the English language arts doesn't talk to the math people.
Right.
So they both let's put problem solving and group collaboration in our curriculums. And yet, you only need it in there once. You don't need it all subjects. So it just duplicates a lot of things. Yeah.
So do you use this in a workshop format to show people how to use it?
I do. Yeah, actually, I include it in all our webinars, just because people say, well, I don't know what to do with my plan. What is this supposed to look like? How much do I commit to? And it's actually those outcomes are quite universal across Canada. I've seen a plan issued by the Saskatchewan government. I've seen in Ontario and the Maritimes what their government plans want, and they're pretty well the same things. There's English, language arts, math, science. They have the same categories. So
coming from the unschooling perspective that you have, you unschooled 5 kids, you know that kids aren't like, hey, mom, at the end of their year. They don't say, hey, mom, did we complete all the learning outcomes for the province of Alberta? This doesn't come up in a conversation. But you as a mom hear those conversation points. You hear, especially if you're homeschooling in a particular way, accountable to the government in a certain way, completely dependent on the province you're in or state or country. But when you are hearing it, then you go into panic mode and comparison mode. And you don't have to do that if you actually understand what the purpose is, or what the purpose of the education is, or what the purpose of the learning outcomes are in your province, and know how to tangibly translate that into homeschool mom ease, which is, what does Legos mean? How is my child learning when they're playing Legos? And then actually tell me what you would say if I said my 7-year-old is playing Legos. What does that really mean? How can I translate that into a learning outcome or into this home education plan?
So I would slot that into probably visual arts, and I would slot it definitely into math. Because visual arts, Lego comes in colors. You can make patterns. You can make art. People do that as a career. They make Lego structures out of Legos. And it's really good for counting, 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x2s. I've used Lego as algebra tiles. So when my kids got into grade 8, I gathered up the little square ones in red and green, And I said, okay, the red ones are your negative counters and the green ones are your positive counters. And here's how, you
Yeah.
deal with that. So yeah, it's very handy. And that way, because it's on our plan, our home education plan, we get reimbursed in Alberta for supplies and resources. So that was very handy. But as an unschooler, what I do is I take that plan, I make 12 copies, and just every year change the grade and go down the plan and say, no, this year, we don't want to buy Lego. This year we want to buy a computer, or this year we want to buy, more in-depth board games, things like that. So because it's a working living document and no government should expect otherwise, because you have the right to make changes in the plan, we just make changes for the year, file that at the beginning of the year, and then make changes throughout the year if we want to buy something. And at the end of the year, if we didn't quite get to math this year, we just erase it and say, okay, here's our plan. This is what we've done.
Oh, I would love to hear how you actually help women, because it's primarily the moms, right? Or at least it is in my experience. But how you actually help them translate or let go of that notion of, I didn't do this thing. Oh dear, I failed. Like what do you typically say to someone?
I say that every child learns from the moment they're born to, their last breath, and pretty well. Anything your child does in the day, you could slot it in that plan. Like those are 22 very basic outcomes. You could plunk a child in front of YouTube for the day and probably cover most of those outcomes by just observing what your child's doing, like maybe, or going grocery shopping, your child is counting out apples, putting them in a bag. Your child is figuring out, estimating as you put things in the cart, how much your total bill is going to be. Right. Then you go home and you slot it in the math thing. But I'm not even that detailed. There's no way I'm going to spend each day recording stuff because I don't get paid for that.
I did do that. It's interesting that you say that because I did do that for a very long time. I've never looked back at it, by the way, for everybody to hear. I never did look back at it. But I remember hearing that, well, but what if a superintendent comes and checks on your home education plan? Because we're registered, then we didn't have the accountability that you're speaking to here. And then when I worked with the advocacy organization for home education in BC, and we were invited to the Ministry of Education in BC, and to speak and to create, they said, an approach to home education in BC, mostly to build an accountability, I think. And they said, there is no administrator that wants to come to your home. They are too busy for that. And I heard that from the mouths of the administrators.
And they're not going to sit there between you and your child and check off what they think your child has learned, because, a lot of, and especially true for unschoolers, the child has learned a lot of things. There's a lot of connections in that brain, but we don't insist on a lot of output like we do in schools. In schools, kids need to generate something, write an essay, draw a picture, create a PowerPoint to show and prove they've learned. We don't do that. We don't ask for that, but we know it's up there in our kids' heads. And so if we just kind of show on our plan, if you want to be accountable to the government, just kind of show, we did this activity. And they kind of know that obviously your child's going to get something out of it, right? It's not going to be measurable, not like in school that gives tests and exams to measure learning. We're not like that in home education, and we don't have to be like a school. Education is different. I think it took a lot in this province to convince the government that we are not teachers. We don't have to abide by 1,400 outcomes in a year. It's different. Learning occurs 24/7, and we're there 24/7. We don't have to have output to prove our kids are learning. We just have observation.
Yeah, conversations. Yeah, really noticing what they're paying attention to. Exactly.
Right.
In fact, even that notion of having to be accountable, well, I won't go into the discussion about, whether people want certain legislation to be responsible to the government, although I know there's some people that really take issue with that. But I'll just speak to, we are uncomfortable with the notion of not having output of grades and tests and all of that, because that's what we're used to. And when I have conversations with people, I'm always asking them, so tell me about your education and tell me what you remember. And do you have gaps? And how did it prepare you for your adult life? And a most important question to me is, tell me, what is an education? What really matters to you? What's the purpose of it? Why are you doing it anyway? And oftentimes people are like, I've thought about that. And when they start to get clear on what an education is, and I'm not actually even prescribing what, I have my ideas of what education really is, what the value is. But when people get clear for themselves in their own words what it means, it helps them create their own rubric for how they homeschool. So then they can always look at the activities in their days and say, is this really serving my perspective on what an education is? Now you release the expectations, you'd feel less tied to something that was conventional, but not necessarily serving you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My definition of education is kids learning knowledge. There are some facts and figures that they might want to know about. But also, understanding the context in between bits of information they pick up here and there. And that's what you're there for. You're the parent to explain things when they ask questions. And, learning skills like learning how to bake brownies and things like that, things that will serve them when they're an adult, right? I think it's really important for homeschooling parents to realize you don't have to write down everything your child's learned in a day, because you'll just spend half your life recording things.
Yes. And you don't need to, and nobody's coming to check it. Yeah.
Be a parent, and if your child puts on a puppet show, well, I'm going to grab my phone and tape it, video it, because that's what I do as a parent. I want to watch that later. So do that. There you go. You got evidence of your child with language arts, trying, directing, theater arts, visual arts, all using that as the puppet show is fulfilling a lot of those core subject outcomes. So there you go.
We're looking at grade 6 according to this particular home education plan. I'm assuming that's because you're speaking to a lot of people in elementary school, probably, right?
Yeah, I picked grade 6 because it's the top level in elementary school. I have them all the way up to grade 12.
You do? Okay.
Most people kind of, yeah.
So tell me how you see the differentness of, or even when people come to have a conversation with you about elementary school versus high school, what do you see as the differences? What do people need to pay more attention? Because I know that they think they do for sure. Or what are the dynamics with someone that's coming to you for high school related conversations?
Well, by high school, a lot of kids, especially if they've unschooled, so self-directed their learning all the way through, we often get parents whose kids are like, oh, I think I might want to try high school at a classroom, or I might want to try it online. So then parents want to know, well, how do I, upgrade my child to be sure they're ready for this, things like that. So we help them through that, but also, how to, we're in Alberta, we're kind of unique in that we can keep our kids somewhat unschooling, but still have to meet government outcomes for high school courses if they want credits and a government diploma.
Right.
They can do that. A lot of unschoolers just keep on learning the way they're learning, and at age 19, they go in, write the grade 12 leaving exams, and be on their way with marks they can present to universities and colleges. Right. So a lot of parents want to know how to do this high school thing, or better yet, how does my child enter a veterinarian program? How does my child, become a electrician?
Yeah.
So we outline all the different routes because there's a ton of choices.
There's a ton.
A
Yeah,
plus-
it's interesting.
Yeah.
People usually default to going, but what if they want to be a doctor, or what if they want to be a lawyer? But these are very different paths. Very
We
different.
we have that one.
You do. Which one? Tell me.
When I talk about this, I ask the audience, okay, name a career. Let's just say your 17-year-old has come up from the basement, put away for a day. He's unschooled, she, and wants to become a doctor. What are you gonna do? And actually, I ask the audience what career. Just name a career, and I always get people saying, "Hey, doctor."
Yeah.
Then I have the slide ready for, okay, here's what they need to become a doctor, and here's what they need to do.
Yeah. And so what do you say, Brett? Like bridging from, you mean coming out of the basement because they're unschooling and we have them, stuck in the basement for 12 years? Yeah.
No, they want to be there.
Yeah, actually, touche. There is that too. I thought you meant because people think that they never come out of the house.
No, not true. Not true.
No,
Kids
it's not.
school or spend their free time in the basement playing video games.
And many other things. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you actually give ideas to that transitioning from?
I have a slide, and then I show them, okay, here's what they're going to need to enter their first post-secondary degree program. They're going to need certain courses like biology, chemistry, math, and English language arts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably going to need pretty good marks in those too. Not kidding you. And then, with that, here's how to get those courses. Don't need a government diploma. Just get the courses, apply to post-secondaries, and then they're on their way, right? So in Canada, there's pretty well all the major universities, you do not need a government diploma to apply to admission programs. You just need certain grade 12 courses. And here's how to get those courses.
Yeah, I just went on a college tour around Lower Mainland, British Columbia, with my youngest, who is thinking he'll be going in the engineering direction. And he loves all the math and sciences and things. And so when I had a conversation, he's doing a traditional program though, so I know it's easy access for him, but barring the work, because the work is challenging. But him getting into that program made me go, hey, what would it be like to be a registered homeschooler going into UBC? So then I asked the admissions officer, and she did not know because people don't know. And so she consulted someone and sent an email to me. And she said, well, we do it based on the portfolio and a transcript. You can create that transcript, but we need to see that they've completed certain classes. So it was really interesting to me to hear it again, that this is not a guarantee. There is not a requirement for a dogwood. Yes, it requires you to be clever in how you approach admissions. It's not a guarantee that you're getting admitted. It's just there are other ways around it. But Judy, you actually chose something, the doctor thing, that my unschooled daughter, second, graduated without a dogwood. She was unschooled right to the end, the most academic in high school of all my four. And then she applied to a Bachelor of a Fine Arts in Ballet program in Ontario. She completed that, and now she is starting a rural pre-med program here. So, and she did not have a traditional approach into college or into university, and she still did it.
Yay, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
So case example number one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and she probably did very well in her arts program,
in her science and math classes in high school.
Yeah, typically kids in classroom school, they're, when homeschooled kids are gearing up in the high school years, it's like the school kids are burning out. Yes. And it's the finish line. Grade 12 is the finish line, and that's the year that counts. And they're just so tired and stressed and mental health issues, and yeah. So it's sad, but if your kids haven't been exposed to a lot of structured learning, they love structured learning and they do your marks.
Yeah, that is a really wild thing, hey? Because their time is so forced in high school for whatever, whether it seems relevant to the child or not, their time is prescribed. And whereas with a homeschooled high school kiddo, they're like, all I know is that I put more transcript credits onto that transcript than any that I did with or that I observed with my other kids. And I was like, I think we need to take some off because it almost looks not real, except it was. She was doing all these really interesting things.
Yeah.
But so what is your most frequent offering to homeschool moms in Alberta? I'd love to hear so we can make sure to share that with everybody.
We do a lot of webinars from Alberta Homeschooling Association. We do a lot of webinars. I do a lot of webinars for Unschooling Canada. So try and keep it Canada-wide, how to unschool. I know it's a little harder in Quebec, but it's the rest of the provinces are pretty well similar in requirements. So we do webinars every 2 months of how to unschool. Yeah.
Isn't that a wild thing? Because if you're a 15-year unschooler, then you're like, well, just have fun, treat it like a Saturday, And but in the beginning, we're so used to a conventional approach that it's really hard to get out of the mindsets to move into that.
It really is. I had trouble. You probably had trouble.
Absolutely.
Coming from a school environment, and I try and explain it to people, especially teachers and people in the school ecosystem, try and explain self-directed learning, and they get it to a point, but they think, okay, the child can determine their pace, but really they need to learn this and this and this. And I'm like, oh, well, they'll self-learn it when they need it. And they look at me like I have two heads. So
I get it, because I can remember, just like you in the beginning, thinking, what? No, I'm going to do something for my kids. But then gradually come to understand, at least I hope everybody will come to understand, that this thing we have here has every little bit of human knowledge ever known to anyone. Yeah. And why are we trying to jam knowledge bits into kids from, a certain time each day for 5 days a week for 12 years, when at the end of the day, they could just do this in 30 seconds on ChatGPT and get a very complex answer. And I think the question suggests that there's more to an education than stuffing knowledge bits into somebody's brain. Yeah. And with play and imagination and creativity, then innovation can be born. And what I see as the most important element of an education is that it's raising you up to live a purposeful life. And because I did do the classical homeschool approach, I did a lot of Latin. The root word of education is educato, and it means to raise up. And so I always ask, what are we raising up anyway? Are we trying to raise up a curriculum or, learning outcomes? Are we trying to raise a child in front of us? Who are they? What are they supposed to do? How can I equip them today? Or how can I let them be themselves today?
Yes, be who they're going to be. Yeah. And I think, I love teachers. I think teachers are the best part of school. And I think what's missing is they're so focused, because they have to be accountable to the government. Mm-hmm. Will focus on, covering all the curriculum, have to get it done. And yet kids need relationships. They need definitely relationships, time with parents and siblings, but also with other adults in their lives, the coaches and the teachers. Yeah. But teachers are maxed out, they don't have time to give everybody a proper relationship. So that's what kids need, because everything else is in their phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's very exciting, especially right now in Alberta for you guys. Lots going on. I mean, I know it's not for the education system right now, but it's very exciting to welcome a whole lot of new homeschoolers into homeschooling. And from my perspective, I don't work with any one person from a certain part of the world, but ultimately I know that there is no right prescription for education. It is just, who are you as a mom or as a parent? What do you care about? What do you want to do with your kids? And what do you want them to know before they leave your home? But that's few and far between, that conversation, to who is that child and why are they here and what do they care about and how can you nurture that so they can grow up and live their purposeful lives. Yeah.
They would love you for that.
Yeah.
Kids.
I'm full circle now. I'm sure you had this too, but I had one kiddo last week tell me, Mom, I'm homeschooling my kids. She has no kids. And I'm like, hey, that was so cool. But she said, this whole self-directed education is the only real education anyway. And I was like, that. Yeah, that.
That's so true. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's
well,
good.
It was a pleasure chatting with you. And so where do people find you online?
I'm at judyarnall.com. I'm at my book title, unschoolingtouniversity.com. And Teresa, I gave you a copy of that plan, the grade 6 plan, doc file. And feel free to share it. If anybody wants a copy of it, they can ask you for it. And I would just, change the province, change the grade, and all the same outcomes pretty well. They still apply to all grades, like grade 1 to grade 12.
I really appreciate that, because even, in BC, you have to have an academic program, for the child, but it doesn't say you must have it outlined. And at the same time, I think it's really valuable for us to feel more at ease with what we're doing with our kids when we know that we really are hitting all the marks. That's why I think it's valuable for us, even if we're full unschoolers, to understand how kids actually develop, or understand how they learn, or frankly, understand, a lot of why these things matter to you. So then you feel more at ease, and then you're not questioning why it is that you're not incorporating an hour of violin practice every day for each of your kids. That was me. I could barely get 15 minutes for each of my kids. Violin. But one mom in the co-op said, my kids are doing an hour a day. And I was like,
wow. I want to point out that everything on that plan is kid generated, right? So I'm not pre-planning things as much. I am kind of, this is what they did, put it in the plan, right? And then I just kind of work backwards. Yeah.
Perfect.
And if people if they want some ideas for different grades, like grade 3, grade 9, we also have those plans on the website at albertahomeschooling.ca.
Okay. Yeah. Just to have an idea, because that's kind of the point, is that sometimes people have zero point of reference.
Yeah.
And going into it feels daunting. Yeah.
It does. It really does. And if you look at that plan, it's like, that's pretty simple. I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's confidence building. Yeah. Absolutely. Maybe we should rename it the Confidence Building Home Education Plan.
Yay.
Yes, it's amazing. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We'll have to actually do this in real time sometime. We're not that far away from each other. Although I never know when I'm supposed to go to Alberta, because it's always nice in BC where I'm living in the Kootenays. But yeah, let me know when you're in these parts. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.